ladies and gentlemen, hello, hello, hello. Hey, I apologize for the hour delay that we suffered there. Um, Here's the thing. I know that everybody has their own schedule. Hey, Tony, hey, lad, dude, we were very late tonight. I apologize, my brother. Hey, you know you can always hit us up in the comments later on, um, however it goes. But I do appreciate you chiming in. Hey, we were late today, but here's the thing: every day is a new day for history. I'm happy we're trying a new setup here tonight because hey, we had time to, as everything was going on, to try this new setup um, and to do something different. I Oh, let me introduce any of you all who, if this is your first time joining us, my name is Eddie Phillips. This is the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge session. We do this session every Thursday to go over Black history and general knowledge that hasn't been shared either in your history classes, in your general knowledge, and our attempt to do this is so that we can all learn together, right? That we can have discussions, interactive discussions that inform us and allow us to share these episodes with others who want to be equally informed. Um, if you see my eyes looking towards my laptop, it's because I'm so used to speaking directly into the computer. And this is a little bit of a different setup. So please forgive me tonight if you see me kind of look like I'm everywhere. But um, I just want to make sure that you don't think that I'm losing it, just to have it. But as I said, Sean Anthony, good for you. Thank you for joining us. Um, we're gonna still do an hour here, and we're gonna talk about some things today. And as I was doing this, I was trying to get on and send out the indications and things and let people know that we were on and stuff like that. Um, but I'm just gonna go forward and what I need to do um, here today because, as I said, we teach history here on Erudition, and there's a lot of history being made even right now. You know, there are things that are being done right as we speak. A couple weeks ago, we had the reversal of Roe versus Wade. We have all these things going on with the former president. We have so many things that are happening in our environment that's changing the way we do things. And at the heart of all of that, at the heart of all of that, I would argue that the biggest thing that we're going through right now is this identifier that the status, the stratified existence of this country, as far as the number of people, is changing. That's just the reality. African Americans are who have traditionally been the minority are now becoming the majority of the people. They're rising up. There'll be more blacks in the next decades than whites. And unfortunately, there are people who are dead set against that. And they're angry about that. And they will do anything in their power to maintain power. They want to maintain the power dynamic. And in order to do that, right, they must maintain what they're doing. And so if they want an apartheid type system, and so they're pushing for that. Sorry. All right. But here we are. Here we are. Here we are. Here we are. Sorry, I was getting messages in. All right, so tonight I was kind of hesitating there, as I usually do, to try to see if we can get some other folks in on this conversation and what we're doing. But here's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about teaching Black history and its importance in all of these things that I just said that are going on. If you don't think that Black history is an important thing for us to teach, about a year ago, everybody was so amped up and freaked out about CRT and critical race theory and the idea of blacks wanting to learn more about their history. And it had gotten so bad that you had governors and states trying to actually make laws to take out what they thought was woke conversation. And when asked what CRT actually was, many people couldn't define it. They couldn't define it. And so what wound up happening is a whole lot of confusion. Confusion. Tonight, I want to talk about why that is. Was it last week? I think it may have been a week before. We talked about Carter G. Woodson. And I spent a lot of time going over Dr. Woodson and talking about his contribution to the teaching of Black history, what they call back then Negro history, and the establishment of what was Black History Day, Black History Week, and then eventually Black History Month. And so I want to get back into that tonight. I want us to go into that. And I want you all who are there, those who are joining us, first off, let me know you're in there. Send me a hello. Sorry, as Tony said, even if you can't stay, just let me know that you're in there so I know that we have some people out here who who are listening to what we're saying. Lately, I've been to this point where I don't want people just coming in and gawk and leave. I want you to interact and I want you to talk, right? I want you to interact with us and learn. But I want to talk about Dr. Woodson. Hey, Taisha, I appreciate you. I appreciate you for sticking with us when we were a little bit late today. But you call my house, so you know things that were going on. Hello, Matthew. Hello. But let's get into this, right? We're 10 minutes into the program. I think whoever is here is going to be here, and we're going to keep on moving. If they're not here, they'll join in later. One of the things I have always thought was quite interesting is that Dr. Woodson felt that it was very important for Black people to know their history. He felt that people who did not know their history, as he wrote, The Miseducation of the Negro, that if you did not know your history, it contributed to two problems. It contributed to the idea that whites had that blacks were violent, criminal, evil, and had provided or discovered nothing into society. That was erroneous, but this is what was being taught in the schools. His other issue was that when we don't know who we are, we fall into this trap of letting people tell us who we are, and we start to believe the rumors and the theories and the crap that is being said to us. And so he spent a majority of his life trying very hard to teach our people. And I'm going to tell you tonight that Carter G. Woodson is a role model to me, because very often with African Americans, we fall into a trap where we don't want to know history. Don't hear me out. We don't want to know our history. We don't want to be told the bad parts of our history. We don't want to be reminded of those things. And in many cases, we, and my wife likes to use this word, we parrot or we mirror the rhetoric that in our heart we know is wrong. That we know is wrong. We also co-sign when someone in our grouping, in our job, in our environment says something about Black history that is absolutely not correct. Even when we know better. Because we don't have the confidence to speak out and say, hey, wait a minute, what you said right there was absolutely positively wrong. I will give you a primary example of that. A primary example of that was the Tulsa Black Wall Street media circus. Blacks who had learned about Black Wall Street talked about Black Wall Street. And they were shocked, some of them, to find out about it. Whites who learned about Black Wall Street were shocked too, but this is what the media did. They got so caught up in the idea of the abuses and the cruelties and the things that had happened 100 years ago and talking about that, salivating over the violent history, that they neglected to tell you the story of the reemergence of those people. They neglected to tell you what is often so much a problem in our culture. They focused on the lynching as the only issue. And they never focused on the courage, the resolve, the ability to come back from that. Carter G. Woodson would say in his writing, he said in The Miseducation of the Negro, that without the education, the stymied and revision education in this country, there would be no need or no purpose for whites to lynch blacks. But because we spend so much of our time, and I try, even when I do the show here, we spend so much of our time talking about the violence and the evils and the things that went on, that we lose ourselves in talking about the other parts of that history. We lose ourselves in the full understanding of who we are. And that is an unfortunate truth that I think we really need to fix. Here's the thing. There was a teacher, Frances Ellen Watkins, Harper. Harper was her last name. Watkins was her middle. She taught school as she was a former slave, and she had learned by stealing education. She was an acolyte, a friend of Carter G. Woodson. And she talked about learning to read in what she wrote in 1853. And her quote, and I quote, she says, "But some of us would try to steal a little from the book and put the words together and learn by hook or by crook." The desire to learn bothers me in the black community. I have had black folks who have told me, I learned enough. I don't want to learn anything else. I've had black folks tell me all I know is this or that. And we have to do better. Our ancestors understood, as Frances Harper said, steal away. Steal away. That's a popular term coming out of slavery. Steal away with me to the river. still away with me, because we felt, our ancestors felt that they had to take what was denied to them. They had to go forth and take it. And we still have those types of phrases in our society, right? We hide the idea of robbing, stealing, spitting. I'm going to spit some knowledge to you, right? Those words, those phrases have meaning. They come from a culture where we have told ourselves that the idea of learning has to be something slightly reprobate. It can't be pure. It can't be innocent. We have to spit, steal, take, get a little knowledge, borrow some understanding. These are terms. I was reading about one of the teachers who Carter G. Woodson inspired. And one of the teachers, a Miss McGee, she taught in Louisiana. She taught a school in Louisiana. And at a time in the 1930s when it was very unlikely, most blacks were not educated. School as an institution for African Americans, for blacks, was not a priority. Cotton, work in the fields, was a priority. And all of the Department of Educations throughout the country were ran by whites, who gave schools, black schools, little bits of knowledge, old books. But in those books that they gave, it was always about white accomplishment. White accomplishment. Here's the funny part about all of that. Because slaves and former slaves had given all that money that kept America going, after slavery, after the Civil War, sharecroppers, the taxes that were levied against sharecroppers, that black sharecroppers had to basically take on most of the tax, while the white landowner, he took all of the money from the blacks to pay the taxes that he had to pay. And it was a situation that was called double taxing. And that money, just like it does now, was the money that was supposed to be cultivated and sent to the schools. So blacks were working and paying for an education that they were not really being provided. And they were getting books and things that did not freely teach them about their ancestors. It taught them that George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, all of these men had done great things for the country, had done great things in the history of the world, had pushed the idea of democracy and freedom, when in fact it took a civil war to actually, and blood, to actually free black people. And unfortunately, when teachers like Miss McGee would read in front of her class, when she would have to talk to her class, she had to teach about these men. Something that is still going on today. The curriculum was dictated by the parish, by the Department of Education. It was pre-approved. It was outlined. And they had white principals and administrators in the school who would make sure that these black children, our ancestors, our great-grandparents, were taught. They were taught these erroneous facts of history. The things that they say that they know what they know. They learn this. The local school boards gave instruction. They told the teachers to teach from the lesson plan and to not deviate. But blacks who had been former slaves, blacks who understood the idea of steal away, taking, whispering. Let me tell you something. Did you know this? They taught in these schools in a rebellious way. Miss McGee was one of those people. She used Carter G. Woodson's book, his book on Negro history. And in her records, she said she would leave the book on her lap under her desk. And what would happen is that when the principal came in or the administrator came in, she would slide up a little bit as she, on her desk, was basically the rubric, the lesson plan, the curriculum that she was supposed to teach. And she would turn back to that curriculum. And when he left, she would go back as she would change and let them know, these children know that they had worth. She was one of few. You know, as I went through my life, as I've grown up, I realized, I was telling my sons, I had been blessed with a really good education. Assimilation through education and indoctrination. Churches did the same. Yes, they did. Yep, learning about that now in my political science course. I loved the fact that when I read that, I understood, right? That revolutionary, that rebellious nature of education. That's what I tried to do here. Taking you outside of the norms that you have been taught to give you something a little different. A little different. To inspire you to go to another level in your Black history, in your education, in your understanding. Because see, if we can do that for each other, we can get away. We can get outside of this idea that we are less than. If you don't believe that Black people still believe that they are less than, consider this. Whites in the South seceded from the nation, and they left and they fought for money. Today, their ancestors say that the rebellion was about pride, self-pride, pride in the real America, pride in the real country. They are the real rebels. How do you rebel against the freedom? It cannot be argued. It cannot be argued that Black people enslaved before the beginning of the foundation of this country. Before the beginning and the foundation of this country, Black people were the ones who were seeking freedom. That's what they did for hundreds of years, in many different ways. They were the rebels, stealing education. The Maroons that I talked to you a couple of weeks about, who ran away from the plantations, who established a nation to interact with the indigenous people. And while all of you all are out here screaming, I am an Indian, or I got Indian in my blood, the Indian was proud that he had you in his blood. We want to be everything other than what we are. Because you don't understand what these people did, how they rebelled. Black people are the real rebels without a flag. They are the ones who did everything to fight, willing to fight for a country that had given them nothing. There were men, as I go back, and I talk to you all about the Revolutionary War. Hey, cuz, good to see you. Yes, I ask God to help every week. Here's the thing. There were black men and women who participated in the Revolutionary War for the establishment of freedom for this country, earned their freedom, and their kids were supposed to be perpetually free. And when the other acts and compromises happened after the establishment of this country, their children were stolen and taken back into the South in bondage. Hear me right. You fought and gave everything, some legs, wounds, lives, so that you can get freedom for your family. And when they were freed, it was stolen from them. When you read Northrop's book about 12 years a slave, that's what he's talking about. Robbed and stolen back into slavery simply because of the color of your skin. But you still fought for a country. Revolutionary War, War 1812, Civil War, on and on and on. Every war, every confrontation, every conflict. And when it came down to the Seminole War, the war that many of you don't know about, I had people who told me after I talked about the Maroons, well, why are you saying this stuff about indigenous people? Because you don't know it. You don't know it. It's glossed over in the history. But the Seminole War, the war that happened, was against the idea of Maroons, black slaves who rebelled, people who arrived over here from 1600, 1700 into the 1800s, who decided, I'm not going to live in bondage. I would rather run into the woods and risk my survival or death. And they found a way to survive in the most hostile environments in the Americas, places that the whites wouldn't go. And not only did they find a way to survive, but they came back. They went back and forth between the plantation systems. They rescued their people. They stole cattle. They stole livestock. They fed their tribes. But you want to argue because of what you've been taught. I got Indian in me. You are the indigenous people. You are part of them. Some of your ancestors absolutely are part of the indigenous people. When you say to yourself, I got Crow, right? I got Seminole, right? I got Cherokee in me. Yes, you do. Because they accepted your tribe, your people, our ancestors, and they worked with them. The education of black people is so important, but it is so often blown off. People probably get mad at me. I said yesterday, my wife was on, and I said, I've now started to come on Thursdays, and I do another show on Saturdays. Because what has happened is I get people who say, hey, I can't be on, Eddie. I can't. I get it. But I ask every episode, leave a question. This is interactive. Make a statement. Tell me that you get it. Tell me that your kids get it. I could have easily tonight said, I'm not going to do the show because I had so many things going on. But I said to myself, there is nothing more important. Carter G. Woodson is a hero of mine. He went further than I ever will. When Carter G. Woodson was working on Negro history and trying to teach his people, Dr. Woodson had women who were throwing themselves at him. And Dr. Woodson told one of those women, you want to marry me off, but my calling is the education of our people. And I'm willing to forego all of that for our people to learn who they are. But many of us don't know who Dr. Woodson is. I've been telling people for weeks to go get the miseducation of the Negro. I've been telling people for weeks to go educate themselves. I've been telling people for months. My wife sometimes says, you get loud, sound angry. That's passion. If we do not educate our children, if we do not tell them where they come from, if we do not provide this information, if we keep living with only what we knew back then, you weren't allowed to know anything back then. Dr. Woodson, because I keep going back to Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black History Month, Dr. Woodson said that once he had gotten his doctorate degree, it took him 20 years to expunge the conditioning that he had been exposed to in the education system. 20 years to go in and find who we are, what we are, where we come from. To talk about those black men who traveled across the Atlantic into the New World. To talk about those black people who went into Europe and educated and provided knowledge to Europeans that they did not have. To talk about the Nubians, to talk about the Phoenicians, to talk about the Carthaginians, to talk about the Canaanites, to talk about people who taught us that many of us don't even know about. They used to give us that old statement, you come from kings and queens. And everybody would say, wait a minute, everybody can't be a king or a queen. And then they tell you, well, black people sold each other into slavery. These are the things that we learn in our American education system. Blacks provided nothing. They did nothing. They were slaves. Can you imagine as a man, I know, and all you men and women who watch this, those who are alive tonight, think about this. Think about this. The first time you found out about your ancestors in school, what were you taught? What was the first time you were taught anything about black people in history in American courses? Go ahead, type it in there. Be honest. When is the first time you picked up a history book and saw somebody that looked like you? What were they doing? Go ahead, I'll give you a couple of seconds. Because I really wanted this to be, I want this, this right here, I want your interactive input. It don't matter if you 10, 11, 12 years old. What was the first thing that you saw as a black person in a history book? And be honest about it. Go ahead. Come on, y'all. I know y'all out there. Come on, give me something. Tell me something. I give you 30 seconds. That's time in the broadcast when you're doing a podcast. Come on, tell me something. What was, be honest. What was the first thing you found out about your people? Omar said slaves. Teddy said the very first was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., later Frederick Douglass. Okay. And then that was Harriet Tubman, of course. Whenever I saw a black person in a history book, they were usually building railroads or plantations, or sometimes leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Frederick Douglass in peace. Mark said slave ships and being whipped. Exactly. I told you all when we first started Erudition as a network that one of the things that we always get taught is oppression and the rebellion against the oppressor. They choose certain people. Not saying that our African American ancestors like Dr. King, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, all these people don't deserve praise for some of the things that they did, but they were not the only ones. False slavery, that's a whole other one too. I only recall during Black History Month who invented what. It's funny, I don't recall it in the book when I was in elementary school. I only recall seeing slavery. And that's true, Ty. That's really what it is. If you were to go through books on American history, which I've gone through many books on American history at all levels of school, you will find that the first thing they talk about is slaves. They introduce the Indians, the folks in South America, and how the Spanish conquered them. And then they go into the idea of bringing Africans over. And here and there lies the trail that we should follow. The Europeans came over to the Americas with the idea, this is what Dr. Woodson tried to put in his History of the Negro. They came over because they knew something was here. They knew it was here because the Portuguese, the Arabs, and even throughout Africa and the Moors, everybody had talked about the riches that laid beyond. They didn't have the ability. History shows us the Vikings sailed down the coast to certain parts of Africa. We know that. We know that the Vikings sailed over to certain parts of Northern America. We know that. They let us make sure we know that. But here's the thing. We also know that there were maps drawn. Pierre's map is an example of a map that was drawn showing coastal areas of the United States. That now we argue, well, they could have been put there later on after Columbus. But Columbus knew where he was going. Columbus knew exactly where he was going. And he went there looking for gold. He went there looking for gold. African kings had sailed across the Atlantic, left documentation. Some never came back. They stayed. But they followed the trails. And when they got over here, here's another part of history that you need to understand. It wasn't the fact that they couldn't travel over here. What happened around the time of Columbus that made that such a point, a pivotal point? What happened that was such a pivotal point for history? It's really not hard to understand. Christopher Columbus came over, and his first trip, he had limited men, but he had firearms, he had weapons. And one of the first things that Columbus said is that we could conquer these people easily. That's what he said. He reveled in the idea of the gold that they had on their spears and the gold things, but they knew about the gold. So when he sailed back, he sails to Portugal. He talks to the Portuguese king and he tells him, he kidnaps and absconds some of the people to show proof. We found the gold that you all have been talking about. Those people exposed to illness, many of them died. More than half of them died. Some we don't even know what happened to them. Second time Columbus sails back after going to Castile, going to Spain, he sails back with ships, weapons, soldiers, and a force to take over those people. And they enslave those people in Hispaniola. They take what they want. They're conquerors. And after they had basically killed them, they realized something. Something that you're not taught in your Black history courses or that is said to you. That's what I meant by following those breadcrumbs and those steps. They realized that the darker skinned indigenous people, they realized that the Africans who had came over there, they had survived. And that they could survive better in those conditions. There is a reason why blacks were taken to South America, to the Dominican republics, to Haiti, to Hispaniola, as they call it. Because you could survive. Because they knew you had been there. They knew you had survived. They knew that you had gone north because the Indian people told them. That's our ancestors. The ancestors that we don't know about because that's not put in our history books. But they will tell us about the 1,000-year reign of the British monarchy. They will tell us about the French monarchy. They will tell us about the Germans. They will tell us about every European. I'll ask you guys a question again, interactively. What was the first thing you learned about Africa in history? At any stage in your school education. Tell me something that you learned about Africa that is not slavery. What cultures did you learn about in Africa? I'd like to know that. Because see, here's the thing. Africa, Kemet, whatever you want to call it, the names for it, before European incursion, there's one place that they always talk about. I'll give you some time. To ask some of these questions while we're doing that. Well, we know that Amerigo Vespucci was the one that they named it after. We learned about a few tribes, but they didn't hammer a subject enough for me to remember too well. I'll never forget it. It was a picture of a young Nelson Mandela in jail in South Africa. Okay, if that's the only thing, the first thing that you learned about Africa, That's even more sad because that's hundreds of years. The poor, oh, come on, cuz. Yes. Because we came from that era, right? They told us about them poor, starving Ethiopians. And they neglected to tell us what they had taken out of Ethiopia. They neglected to tell us how they had deprived these people, how they had gone in there under conquest, and when forced to leave in certain places, the British and other colonizers took essential materials. And then what did they do? They said, come on, help these poor souls who don't know how to feed each other. And then later on, right, even when we got to the Somalian pirate situation, people doing what they got to do to survive because of what you're taking out of their environment. Ethiopia is one of the oldest places in the history of the world. But they never hesitated to show us how despicable they were. I tell you what I remember mostly. I remember Egypt. Every time I turned around to learn anything about Africa, anytime I looked at a book, one of the first things they talked about was Egypt, because Egypt was the hub of the power. Egypt was the gateway to the Greeks, to the Spanish, to the Italians, to the Europeans. And so they always gave high precedence to the latter Ethiopians. So much so right now that even in society, when they make movies, Ethiopians are made to look white. That's the truth. Egyptians, I'm sorry. They're made to look white. And what's so crazy is they make it seem like the greatness of Egypt came from Europe and not the other way around. They make it seem like all of the tribes and the kinsmen, important name, the kinsmen in Africa could not stand on their own, but Africa is the zenith. It's where life comes from in this planet. Kenya, Morocco. We find remnants of early man and woman in Africa. It didn't come out of Europe as they claimed for over 1,000 years, that they revisioned knowledge and told you that that's where it came from. I saw the picture in the second grade. It wouldn't be until fourth grade where we learned about the Rosetta Stone and the things discovered in Egypt. Here's the thing, Teddy. They don't talk to you about the life in the Levant. They don't tell you that Africa and what we call the Middle East, all of that was together. When you read your Quran, when you read your Bible, and you hear about people traveling between these areas, they're traveling into Africa. They're traveling into the original lands that life came from. Refugee, a people who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, and natural disaster. Yes. Here's the thing. A couple of weeks ago, I did an episode and I was telling people about the genealogy of whites, white people. And folks got mad. Oh, I got like 3 comments back of folks saying, oh, I think you want to check your history on that. And in the Erudition interactive group that we have on Facebook, I dropped the scientific one, because there are more than one. I dropped one of the major scientific studies on this mutation, because that's what it is. I'm not insulting anybody by calling things a mutation. Green eyes, blue eyes are a mutation. Right? Blonde hair, different things, these are mutations. Vestigial fingers that appear on people's hands, their sixth finger, those are mutations. Mutations happen. And then there is an issue with selection, whether it be artificial or natural, in which people with similar mutations go together and create more people that share those genes. And it becomes less repressive because they share it. It is a fact. It is a scientific proven fact that people in Italy, people in parts of Morocco, and you look at what it is, who sailed across the Med to go further north into the Britons, they shared those mutations. They had issues with milk and issues with certain things that they could eat. The environment changed or it helped to contribute to their skin color. These are facts. But when I told people that, and I said, well, that's about 9,000 to 10,000 years ago. No, that can't be 9,000 to 10,000 years ago. We've been around longer than that. No, you have not. I posted a question recently. I said, why do people fight DNA so much? And I realized why. DNA, and this, you got to watch how people play this, gives us at a level, right? And I find it the wonderment of God, how God, at that molecular level, that deep, intricate level, is telling us a story about who we are. The fact that you can trace your mitochondrial grandmother, and we can trace her all the way back to Botswana, what we know as Botswana right now. We can trace her back. And we can look at the lineage of everybody in this world. Asian, indigenous people, I don't care if you call yourself Russian, Jew, whatever you want, culture you want to call it. That's your grandmother. And then we can go and see when alterations in the genes happened. And because we don't want to teach that, because there's a patriarchal control, racist, bigoted, supremacist control over that type of information, we are told to not trust that. Don't trust that. By the same people who got folks in South America, parts of Africa, Asia, Australia, digging to find relics and information from ancient times. Why? Because they know all life didn't come from where they said it was. We had decades, centuries of pseudo-archaeologists lying, quite frankly lying. Teddy mentioned the Rosetta Stone, lying about language, lying about understanding, lying. but leaving breadcrumbs for us right in front of our eyes. Often I tell you all about the Renaissance. What was the Renaissance? The Renaissance was simply a return. They wanted to understand ancient methodologies and understandings that had been lost. That's all it was. So what did they do? They went out to go research, dig, study, go to Rome, go to places, go to Africa, go to these places and take this knowledge. Go to Greece. I've been telling you all for quite some time now. A lot of things you think you know, you don't know. I've been telling people to get on here and watch Erudition and learn something that you didn't know. For a very long time in my life, I thought that whenever I read Greek myths, because we have to read Greek, and this is how history works. We go to literature class, go to English class, and they make us read what? What did they make us read? They told us that we needed to go out, we read Greek myths, right? We read Aesop's fables. We read these stories with very limited understanding as to where these stories came from. We didn't really know what was being referenced in Homer's stories. When you read the Iliad or the Odyssey, they talked about these monstrous creatures and all of this, and it was fiction, but based on the idea of islands and places. They gave real kingdoms. Real kingdoms. And they told us about this stuff. And for a long time, I never knew they were referencing Africans. For most of my childhood reading, I had a book of every Greek myth, every Roman myth, a whole book on myths I got from the library. They gave it away. It was a used book. And I would sit up at night and I would read this. And never in my juvenile mind was I making the connection that they're talking about Africa. This obsession with gold, power. The Greeks were fantasizing about the power that they saw in African kingdoms. And I started to say, wow. Once I started to realize, I started to make the linkage. We don't know as much as we think we know. I like that song. Yeah. We don't understand the idea of first people. We don't understand because we haven't been taught to understand. And as I started this, I made the point to everyone that the reason we don't understand is because we haven't been taught. The reason we haven't been taught is because it does not work in a system of understanding. And I talked about earlier Carter G. Woodson. Dr. Woodson was one of many, but he was an inspiration because he let us understand the need for education. The need, as they called it, snatching, stealing information. When they tell you, let's steal away, that term always stays with me, steal away. Frederick Douglass talks about that the white woman taught him how to read a little bit and having to go steal the rest of his education. It says something about a people that they valued education and understanding. They valued it. They understood the wealth of it. Some of these former slaves are some of the most elegant orators in the history of American life, talking about freedom. But we praise Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams. The understanding of our people is so important. Malcolm X, one of the better orators of our recent history, said that he learned a lot of his history from reading Carter G. Woodson's books. It lit a fire in him to know more who he was. And Malcolm came out of jail with a stronger understanding, with a value on education. I don't do this show to bloviate to you. I do this because education to me is important. It is pivotal if our people are to be better, stronger, wiser in the coming generations. It is pivotal that we understand the okie dokes that are being played on us. It is pivotal that we understand that monetary and lascivious conquests don't help us to reach a higher goal. It's important for us to understand that. We are not what you have been told we are. We are not what your kids have been taught in school. We are more than that. And we do this show so you understand we are more than that. A black man who knows that his ancestors mapped the stars, has no fear of saying, I can do it too. I have done programs where we talked about African mathematics. I've done programs where we talked about how we came out of Africa. I've done all of these programs to try to just give you a little bit, start the fire, to go look a little deeper. Know who you are. Nobody had to give you your freedom. Nobody had to give it to you. Malcolm said, how are we going to fight for something that should have been mine by God-given right? But they act as if they gave you your freedom. Men and women died, black, white, and red, and whatever. They died for African Americans, for the children of the slaves to be free. And even when they gave you that, it wasn't complete freedom. But you know what they could never take away from us? What I learned from Dr. Woodson? They could never take away our knowledge. That has to be something that we willingly give up. This program and others, won't just say here, provides you knowledge. Every week you sleep on it. Every week you ignore it. Every week that you don't share it is another week. That somebody is being denied the knowledge that may be able to help them to survive. We got to do something new. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been out here for an hour with you. Thank you. I thank my cousin. I see you in there lighting up the chat. I thank all of you who either logged on late, who will watch this as a as a saved broadcast, or rather it's on YouTube or Facebook. I ask you again to please share. New setup. I like it. I think it's pretty good. You can kind of see, where you can reach us. A lot better for us to be down here and do it this way. More stronger things to come for Erudition over time. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to hold you any further. I will be back on this Saturday I'm being asked, and I won't know if I'm going to do it this Saturday, to do a session where we talk about um, ancestry, and I give you some of the keys um, analytically to go in and further understand how to pull information about your ancestors, grow your knowledge of your personal self, and show you the value of doing that. Um, Maybe we will be able to do that this Saturday. We shall see. But I definitely will be back on this Saturday to do a show. We're trying to do more shows because I want more people to engage. Uh, if you feel led, you'll see down there on the ticker we have a cash app for the Erudition Network. Any donations that you give helps us. We bought a brand new camera that I'm using right now to help with the program. So anything you do, thank you for all of those who have tried to help us over the last year. Every little bit counts. When the final testimony is fully given, you will understand how much you have helped us, and I do greatly appreciate it, so that we can grow this important work. But I'm belaboring on. I'm belaboring on. I will see you all Saturday. See you all Saturday. Thanks, cuz I like it too. It's pretty nice. Uh, you all have a great and wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. And I hope that God blesses you. I may drop some books in here. I didn't do it last week that you may be able to get. I want you to read about Dr. Woodson, Carter G. Woodson. I want you to make him a part of your everyday understanding of Black history, because the man gave his life, most of his life, to try to inform and educate his people. But until next time, you all have a beautiful and blessed rest of your weekend. Thank you.